The Admin Deputy, 1997 to 1999. The sudden and unexpected rise to Deputy Chief was somewhat mollified by the fact that I would now be overseeing at least two of the divisions I was intimately familiar with, Administration and the Emergency Operations Center, or 911 Center. I had now added to my plate the Training Academy, the Technical Support Division, and the Planning and Research Bureau. The Training Academy sort of speaks for itself, except that our academy trained not only our own officers, but sheriff deputies and fire marshals. The academy had located in classrooms, indoor training areas, and offices in a former gun factory in Chantilly, Virginia. That sounds kind of antiquated or run down, but in fact, it was a modern facility that was nicely reconfigured for our purposes. The driver training track had been located on property adjacent to Dulles Airport, which the county owned, and many of us had gone there for years for pursuit driver training. What was new, though, was the new firearms training facility, which I had never seen. It just recently had been completed and now was ultimately under my purview. I have an interesting fence mending story about these two facilities a bit later on. The Technical Support Division was responsible for everything under the sun, all construction projects, the physical plant of all police facilities, the entire fleet, the helicopters, all weapons, uniforms, and communications equipment, aside from 911 dispatching responsibilities, which was under the Emergency Operations Center. The Planning and Research Bureau was primarily responsible for maintaining the department's general orders, dissemination of technology upgrades and training, liaison with the county's IT agency, and crafting legislation that would be proposed to either the Board of Supervisors or to the state of Virginia. The thing that made this position fairly trouble-free was the fact that there were a lot of great people in each of these positions and those under them. Many were civilians who helped maintain continuity, while the sworn personnel tended to move around or get promoted every few years or so. There was always some micro-crisis occurring somewhere in some division. Often I had to play the role of peacemaker or arbiter. I recall one entire administrative staff meeting as I refereed an argument between the Planning and Research Director, a civilian, and the Administrative Support Bureau major. It was really contentious, and I'm not sure either was truly satisfied with the eventual outcome. However, we all lived through it, though some trust may have been lost in the process. One of my more memorable achievements was patching up a rift that somehow developed between the retirees and the chief's office. I don't particularly recall that it was a rift with the sitting chief, Doug Scott. However, it might have been a holdover from the ugly fight resulting in his selection as chief over his competitors. Recall the thumbs down we gave the previous chief when asked to support his preferred successor? I wasn't particularly well connected with the retirees. Those who were more active tended to be from a couple of generations back, the newer retirees not really wanting to be bothered with their social activities or positions on certain issues, influenced over the selection of the chief of police, etc. There were even some schisms within the ranks of the retirees. I figured the one thing that all former cops liked to do was shoot their guns. So I worked through one of the highest-ranking 11th floor secretaries whose husband was a retired captain and an office holder in the Retired Police Association. I asked him and another well-respected confidant to meet for lunch at Puff's family restaurant in Oakton. Ironically, he was Paul Puff, no relation to the restaurant, but an interesting coincidence. Paul, Jack Goldman, and I met for lunch, and after I cleared the air by stating that I didn't know what or who was responsible for these hard feelings, and quite frankly, I didn't care or want to know, I proposed the following. We would have a retiree drive and shoot day at the Academy's range and driver training track. Any retiree in good standing would be welcomed. In fact, they could even bring their wives and teenaged or older kids. The department would cover all of the expenses, and we would get the recruit class to assist and even prepare lunch for everyone. Well, you could have knocked them over with a feather. They couldn't believe it. All of a sudden, it was like everyone was best friends, and there never was a rift. Not wanting to micromanage this, or for that matter, I didn't have the time, I assigned the academy major to work with a group of retirees to work out the logistics, the date, the time, the relays, etc. Doug Scott, while not difficult to convince, was pretty skeptical that this would serve to improve relations. When I approached the county attorney assigned to the police department for his advice regarding liability for such an endeavor, he in effect said, "They were all cops once. They shot their guns and drove their cars. Just ask them not to shoot one another or run each other over, and we'll be okay." In fact, it was more like, "Don't ask me so I can't say no." The event was scheduled to coincide with the retirees' annual fall dinner so that those who came in from out of town could partake in all of this in one visit. It was a huge success. While the driving element has now been eliminated, the once-a-year annual retiree range day is still a huge success. Despite the fact that 95% of my responsibilities were for the administrative benefit of the department, every 2 weeks I adjusted my schedule so that I could work afternoons and evenings in order to attend district station and specialty unit roll calls. I was one of the 2 highest-ranking officials to have the chief's ear, and I wanted to hear from everyone about their concerns, set the record straight on volatile issues, and help everyone understand the inner workings and complex issues that their agency faced.